Welcome to the Digital Electronics Supply Chain channel on LinkedIn. Our goal is to provide useful and independent information about the entire electronics components market from the design stage to the end applications. My name is Georg Steinberger and I am managing this channel. One of the burning questions in the components market today is what will happen in the near-term future? No surprise that all parts of the component supply chain try to create not only more transparency, but also try to predict at least the near-term behavior of critical items. My favorite sparring partner on that topic is Yashar Shahabi, Executive Vice President, Digital Solutions at Sourceability. Welcome, Yashar.
Nice meeting you, Georg. Thanks for the invite.
Yashar, please give us the traditional elevator pitch on Sourceability and your digital strategy.
Absolutely. So thank you again for invitation. Sourceability is a distributor for electronic components where we are a startup company. At least we would like to consider it to be like that. Started in 2015. And we use the power of technology in order to do our distribution in terms of supply chain of electronic components to our customers. And our customers are essentially anybody that buys electronics components, especially the original equipment manufacturers and their contract manufacturers, the EMS.
Excellent, thank you. Yashar, I think, I fear we need to start with a little explanation on what predictive analytics actually is. Not everyone knows that. Maybe you can give us a little idea on that.
Well, the easiest is the crystal ball, right? Having a crystal ball as a distributor for electronic components and tell to your customers where they're going to be in, let's say, a sensible period of time, in the next, quarters or months, and we have a solution inside Sourceability under one of our software products called Datalink.com. And we help, or we try to help at least our customers essentially to have an outlook, to the future in respect to a few different attributes for their bill of materials, for the electronic components that they use within their bill of materials, i.e., for example, pricing, lead time, and a few other things that, hopefully within this call, I would be able to share my screen and show. But that's essentially, at least here in Sourceability, what we refer to when it comes to predictive analytics for the supply chain of electronic components.
Okay, so that sounds like data mining and modeling this data with the help of machine learning techniques to find certain pattern in the data that help you predict the near-term future behavior. I wonder how that can apply to a relatively complex market like the components industry. We have at least 200 million different components used by 2 million different customers in all kinds of varieties and combinations. And I wonder how in that complexity, predictive analytics can really be of help. Any idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And let us, also remind the audience here that Sourceability is not the only company out there, when it comes to supply chain of electronic components offering predictive analytics, right? So we think, we are one of the early, let's say, attempters or the companies, supply chain providers, solution providers that is attempting to solve this problem or attempting to address, the demand for the predictive analytics in the electronic component supply chains, but there are others there as well. And you're absolutely right. It's a combination of all of those things, right? In Sourceability, we have a data science team, that works on a very large amount of data. Obviously, we are a company who did over $1 billion in revenue last year. We are in the top 20, top 25 distributors of electronic components in the world. We have a global footprint, through our marketplace e-commerce platform, which caters for over 100,000 users, on a monthly basis. So the first element that you require for a data science team to be able to put predictive models, and look at, let's say, the future, and albeit that future could be a quarter or two or more, right? Is big data, is a large amount of data. But as you said, this data needs to have some sort of like a rhyme and a reason in it, right? And of course, we're in an era that with the leadership of companies such as ChatGPT, where the artificial intelligence, the AI element of prediction has blown out. So therefore, yeah, as an organization, you need to be aware. As a data science team, you need to be aware of all of those things and try to put the next steps together. And that's exactly what we have done, which I will share my screen in a minute to show to the audience here. And it's all about iteration and try to get better. Nothing at the beginning is going to be the best and the most correct. But we think that we are at a stage where we can offer predictive analytics and as I said, in a few different attributes, for the customers in an iteration moving forward.
Okay, so you mentioned Datalink, which is actually the tool where you have applied predictive analytics techniques at components level. So can you share a little bit how this is set up in Datalink? And you may actually also share your screen to briefly explain that to us.
Yeah, so Datalink essentially is our marketplace for data, right? In Sourceability, we have a marketplace for electronic components under sourceengine.com. And that's where, essentially the users, especially the operational buyers, they go to buy electronic components. But as we know, our industry is also comprised of more complex personas, such as, for example, strategic buyers or engineers. And they're hungry for data because they want to make sure that they're staying ahead of the curve when it comes up to the supply chain of the electronic components, not only there and then when they need components, but also from the strategic point of view. So that's under a software product called datalink.com, which I'm sharing here my screen, to the audience, right? There is a portion of this, which within this conversation, I would focus at, it's called indicators. An indicator essentially are predictive analytics. Here I have a bill of material that I have from my customer. So it's a bunch of basically components. It's, I think, if I'm not wrong, around 80 to 85 electronic components. And here I'm focused at, one of these components, the one that I have indicated on the top, DEA 102500LT. Now, the requirement for us is to ensure that we have our customers' bill of material in advance in order to do a 3 to 6 month prediction. And what we do on those predictions are the following attributes: the lead times, the inventory that is going to be available out there, the average pricing, and the diversity of the suppliers, right? And currently we're looking at the next 3 to 6 months. So as you see here at the bottom, that's the past trend up until the first half of the year, 2023. And this is essentially the summer and autumn season, the Q3, Q4, where if I look at the inventory, we have the green indicating the worst case scenario, the gray, that's the neutral scenario, and the green is the best case scenario, where we think that, for example, in best case, in the next 3 to 6 months, for this component, the amount of inventory is going to increase. And we actually then show, we're going to be talking about the increase to what level in terms of the number, right? And in the worst case scenario, we think that, okay, the inventory will be decreasing. And again, to what level? And, on a neutral basis, we think that there is nothing changing, right? And so on and so forth goes, for average pricing, and you see the pricing here, that currently, for example, is at 10 cents. We think worst case scenario could go up to almost 13.5 cents. At a best case, is going to remain around the same number. So again, we would right now, we would require customers to give up those, bill of materials, those part numbers. We'll look at the amount of data that we have. If we don't have data, we go try to acquire data, right? And we then use our data science team, with models, with artificial intelligence to again try to predict the future. And we're just getting started here, right? So it's all about the iteration, as I mentioned, in order to try to get better.
Excellent. That's really a good introduction on it. I was wondering while we were speaking if the amount of attributes that you could use actually to base your prediction algorithm on could also include things like how many customers are buying that product, because that ultimately tells you about the popularity, the A or B or C status of a product. So I think the opportunities are probably much wider than what you currently use in terms of building the algorithm, right?
Yeah, so it really is, you could incorporate endless amount of data in order to look at every single part number, right? And whether if it's, how many of these components the manufacturers are making, how many distributors around the world have them, right? How many customers are using them. You could even go to a deeper level. You could say, okay, what amount of what node size this component is, right? And what technology is it being used? How
Yes,
much wafers are being indicated. So you could really go deep, right? And some of the customers, they have expectation in that level. Some don't. Depending on the applications. We all know very well in 21 and 22, industries such as automotive were badly hit. They trying to ensure that the customers in that vertical, they're trying to ensure that such occasions, such allocations, at least in their experience in the future, doesn't repeat, right? So I think I would say from vertical to vertical, from domain to domain, the requirements are very different, and there's endless amount of opportunities, right? So it
yeah,
really is early days, right? And we will see how we try to better our algorithms and our data endpoints in order to create more accurate, let's say, models or predictions.
excellent. So thinking about this, what do you think? How mature is the market, our market, actually in adopting predictive analytics? So you read a lot about it in other industries like manufacturing. There's a lot going on with regards to optical inspection to detect failures or problems in the production process. You read about it in predictive maintenance of machinery and so on. But in supply chain, it seems to be pretty fresh. And I was wondering, how mature do you think are our customers or our suppliers to help us building that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the supply chain of electronic components, there is a very large infrastructure in terms of resources for operational procurement, right? Meaning that acquiring quotes, placing orders and managing those orders. We have a traditionally in the last many decades, there is a very large infrastructure dedicated for that, right? But when it comes up to strategic procurement, for instance, right, or the strategic supply chain, all the way from where electronic components are being designed into a printed circuit board with an EDA tool, all the way coming through prototyping, serial production, or aftermarket services, I think there hasn't been enough resources or infrastructure built, right? And perhaps that's where we get into trouble. That's why our industry is very cyclic, right? And over the last many decades, it hasn't gotten any better, right? So therefore, in an industry where strategic procurement is still sort of like a good to have and an add-on, right? These type of, let's say, desires or demands, for non-operational procurement, and in this case, predictive analytics for sure, is something in the future, is at the very early stages. But as I said, we're not the only player. We got competitors out there, whether distributor competitors or software solution providers, or a combination of both. They're seeing a demand and a value there, and they try to address it. So, like anything else, with technology, it's only a matter of time, where there's going to be a catch up, happening there.
Yeah. In fact, I was talking to a big EMS company today, and they didn't complain, but they were a little bit concerned about the way how products or electronic systems are designed today, because most engineers are looking at the BOMs and the electrical functionality, the software functionality of parts, but not necessarily at the context of parts, like roadmaps or availability and so on. And this could eventually lead to problems later on. And that's why I think predictive analytics could not only be interesting for strategic purchasing, but also already at the design level to provide additional information that are not necessarily at the engineer's fingertips.
Yeah, you're spot on. This actually brings us to a very interesting point that I could, share here, and perhaps, give a segue, for a future collaboration that you and I can have on this channel. You're 100% correct. A bill of material, it always gets, put together, by the engineer or a group of engineers, that they're essentially designing that product, right? And that happens, in an EDA tool such as a Cadence or an Altium or a Mentor Graphics, where, it's a CAD tool, the printed circuit board gets designed, and obviously electronic components, get introduced into that board, and you end up with a bill of material. And I 100% agree with you. At best, these engineers, they're looking at maybe the life cycle, maybe the rows reach compliancy, because at the very most, they're looking at, does this component do what I want it to do, right? So they're aware of the technical information, depending on the complexity of the component with the data sheets and all sorts of different, and we know the electronic components are complex. There could be, up to 100 different attributes, depending on the functionality of the component. So we cannot also blame the engineers, because they're already, running, on large amount of data. An average bill of material, contains, hundreds or even up to thousands of components, right? And each component could have up to, tens of, or hundreds of, data points. So for engineer to be expected to now, go beyond life cycle to what I call the commercial reality, right? I put a bill of material together. It's a design that I like. It's great. It's unique. It's revolutionary in the industry. But how we looked at as an engineer can be by these electronic components, right?
And how many risks have you designed in, for example?
Correct. How many risks have you designed in? What is the commercial risk of that bill of material, right? At current status, and then add to that, the future, right? How possibly, in the future, and how far out in the future are we going to go is going to depend on the industry, right? So I think those are the data points that, we are, working to provide to the engineering community, and that's the initiative that I'm not in the courtesy to mention that right now. Our marketing team, together with our software product team, will have by the end of this quarter, announcement, where we have made some efforts under the leadership of our Datalink, and our marketplace source engine, to help and assist the engineering community. And hopefully maybe in Q4, if the audience who likes, to watch this video, and hopefully we have, brought in some value added data, that they could have maybe a part 2 of our video to watch that. And then I will, be in the better position and more in the courtesy of being able to reveal what those are.
Sounds interesting. Maybe as a last question, because we are already well into the length of the conversation, can you give us a prediction? What do you think? How long will it take for predictive analytics to really catch on in standardized procurement processes or tools? So is it 1 year? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? So what do you think is the incubation time that we need for that?
Yeah, look, I somehow try to sync myself, with a special event in our industry called Electronica that happens every 2 years.
Next year, then.
In our industry, right? And already, I had appointments, at the last year's event in 2022, where customers were very encouraged, to look at, okay, what type of offerings do we have, in terms of market intelligence, right? Whether if it's current status or the future predictions. So, I'm very, I'm convinced that by the next year, by the 2024 Electronica, there will be at least a dozen or maybe more, solution providers in this area that will be attending Electronica. Our customers are going to be, very encouraged to see some solutions, and we're going to be one of those, companies. So I would say, it is only an Electronica or 2 out. So, the 3 to 4 years, let's say, where, the customers are going to start introducing an elements of, let's say, market intelligence, current status, and future prediction into their regular, let's say, methodology of procurement, albeit operational procurement. That's personally what I think.
Excellent. So thank you very much for that. I think it was quite an interesting right through the current capabilities of predictive analytics in our business. And I'm curious to see how that actually develops. So probably we should speak in a couple of quarters when you're further down the line and when we're approaching next Electronica to see how that actually has developed. So thank you, Yashar, and have a good time. Bye-bye.